Hopeology, stories of hope, healing, and resilience. I'm your host, Christina McKelvey. Today we speak with Dr. Andrea Annibale. She shares about her journey having a later-in-life career change and how she navigated graduate school. We explore the importance of human connection and self-compassion, grief and life transitions, and how those themes inform her work. She also talks about the importance of showing up authentically and being an LGBTQ ally. We will be right back. Today we have Andrea. How are you?
I'm doing really well. How about you?
Doing well, thank you. So you've been in your practice for about a year?
Just a little over a year.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, tell me a little bit about yourself, your focus, or just kind of your background as a psychologist.
So I'm a baby psychologist.
And a baby psychologist.
A baby psychologist is what I call myself. Yeah, I'm new to the career field. I worked in higher education for about 15 years before I decided to go back to school and become a psychologist. I don't know. Let's see. I opened my practice about a year ago, and I have learned that I really love working with people who are struggling with being human. So, what that looks like in terms of trauma or life transitions, or, I have a lot of people whose relationships are changing with their loved ones, whether it's the end of a relationship or children moving into adulthood or the loss of someone special to them. I also really, really love supporting our LGBTQ community here. So I have a lot of teens who are exploring gender identity and what that means and things along those lines. So I haven't quite narrowed down to one specific focus, more so just encompassing broadly just what it means to be a person and the stuff that we struggle with here.
You mentioned people struggling with being human. And that's a struggle. It can be.
It is a struggle. And we don't really live in a society that values or embraces self-compassion. There's a lot of perfectionism and expectation that we place on ourselves as well as others. And, I found that the more expectations, let me rephrase that, the more non-communicated expectations that we have of other people, the more we tend to have on ourselves. And so people really struggle with that, Also, grief, when people talk about grief or think about grief, oftentimes they're only looking at it in terms of death and those significant relationship losses. But really, grief can mean anything that is presenting differently now than the way you had anticipated or expected. So, the loss of what you thought your career might look like, or your relationship with your children might look, or the relationship with your partner. When we're sometimes somebody close to you will be diagnosed with a pretty significant health concern or issue, and there can be grief associated with pivoting and figuring out, like, what does my life look like now? Or what is their life going to look like now? We have these retirement plans, or we have these travel plans, or, I don't have grandkids yet. So what does it mean now that my health is changing? What is my mobility going to look like, and my accessibility to certain areas and things along those lines? So I think there are just so many pieces to being human that we maybe don't think about or consider as just, this is what it's like to be a person, to live in this world. And sometimes it's really, really hard and we struggle.
Yeah, you mentioned grief is not just about death, but it's about those transitions. You call them those pivots in life, which is something that is the human experience.
Very much so. Yeah.
And how do you navigate that experience, or help your clients navigate that human experience, those transitions? Like, do you use like the stages of grief? Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, referenced the stages of grief. And I know I use that with my clients for transitions, but how else do you help them through the human journey?
I think it's a little bit different with everyone, so for some people, they want something a little bit more expedient, maybe. So EMDR is a really common trauma intervention. I use something called accelerated resolution therapy. It's similar to EMDR, but just a little bit different. And I have a link to that on my website if you want to go into more detail around that. So sometimes it's like a brief targeted type of intervention, but for me, I find a lot of times it's just sitting with them, just being present and allowing them to tell their story in a way that is genuine and authentic to them. I want to provide a space for my clients where they feel seen and heard in maybe a way that they're not able to feel seen and heard in their everyday life. A place where they can just come in and exhale and breathe and go, yeah, this is what's happening. And I don't know what to do about it. And this is how I'm feeling, or this is what it looks like. And just kind of exploring what it means for them to be in that space. And then weaving in, I think I use a lot of Kristen Neff's self-compassion framework, what it means to just turn inward and say, well, what if we didn't have that expectation? What if it looked a little bit different? And does it allow you the freedom and the flexibility to maybe consider options that you couldn't have before? That's the other thing, is sometimes we hold on to ourselves a little too tightly. And as we know, when you grab onto something living tightly, it wiggles and struggles to get free. That's all it wants. And so whether you're holding on too tightly to yourself or a relationship or a job or whatever, people don't like to feel confined. And so sometimes it's just bringing that to light and seeing how we can release that grip just a little bit so that we can breathe and think more clearly, to be able to make different types of decisions as we're moving through the grief or transition or the pivot or whatever it is.
It's hard to move through those transitions, like you said, when there is a tight grip, when you're trying to hold on to something in the past, or if someone else is trying to hold on to that thing for you.
Yes, the expectations that other people have on you. And then you put that on and you impose it on yourself. Well, I was supposed to be this, or I was supposed to do that, or this is what the plan was. It's like, well, that's lovely. What if the plan looked a little bit different? What if we just tweaked it a little bit? Then what would happen?
Right. If we looked at it from a different angle. And you mentioned one of your big focuses also is on the LGBTQ plus community. And I'm curious how being human and supporting them, through their journey and just sitting with them, like you said, what that does for them. What does that for that community?
Yeah. Well, not being part of the community, I can't speak firsthand. I just want to say that
you're an ally.
I'm an ally.
You're an ally.
I love being an ally. It's one of my favorite roles. If I can't be in it, then I want to stand proudly next to and or support and lift up and raise up and bring other people into position. So, so I can't speak from firsthand experience and or knowledge, only with the feedback that I've been provided and then with my own intention. So I strongly believe that especially in the therapeutic space where, people are supposed to be received with no judgments and all of these other ideas that we have around what therapy looks like, I feel like it's really super important to healing to be able to show up authentically, whatever that means. Because if we can't say what's true and what's real and acknowledge it, then how do we know how to work with it, heal it, grow it, empower it, So, And that goes for the LGBTQ community as well as, every other individual. Like, I just feel it's really important to be able to be authentic. And so within our community, it's very small and very conservative. And this is new. We have a whole generation of humans who are really embracing what it means to feel good in their skin and in their identity. And so we have
to be authentic.
We have the adults that have gone before them that have said, this is what I'd like, this is what it should be. And then we have our teens who are coming up, watching the models who have gone before them saying, I've always been curious about this, or I've always struggled with this part of me. What does that look like?
How do you create space for individuals such as, those that are part of the LGBT community to be able to feel authentic within your therapy room? And how do you also be authentic towards them?
So how do I create space for them?
Yeah.
I just allow them to say what they want to say and encourage them to explore that. What does that mean for you? What does that look like? What kind of pressure are you coming up against? How does safety play into this? Who do you feel safe sharing your authentic self with?
Safety plan.
Yeah. Who do you feel unsafe sharing your authentic self with? And again, not being, what was the second part of the question?
I'm curious, how does a therapist show up authentically?
Oh, how do I show up authentically?
As a therapist.
How do I show up authentically as a therapist? I think that's just one of I've gotten feedback that that's just one of the things that I do. I'm not afraid to be ridiculous.
Awesome.
I'm not afraid to call myself out. I'm not afraid to, when I make a mistake, quickly correct it. Always in my, introductory phase of meeting somebody, invite them to share feedback with me. This is the one place you should be able to say, that made me uncomfortable. I don't know what you meant by that. Your face did a thing right then. What are you thinking? Just as I will encourage them to explore, I encourage them to challenge me, because I feel like this, the therapeutic space is where you practice hard things. It's where you practice being a person and self-advocacy and communicating in ways maybe you don't feel safe to do out in the real world, because there might be some sort of retribution, or it might come back to bite you later on. Somebody might hold a grudge. Well, I don't have that type of I care deeply about my clients, but there's no reason I have to hold a grudge or to be upset or to be triggered by what they've said to me. So I really encourage them from the get-go, challenge me. If you have a question, ask. And there have been times that I'll say something and I'll hear it come out of my mouth, and I'll stop and say, let me explain what I mean by that. Let me, or maybe a few minutes will have gone by and, I've said something that could have been perceived like 15 different ways, and one of them was really not good. I'll pause and go, hold on just a second. I said something a minute ago. I just want to clarify what I meant by that and see if you had any questions about that. So I think that's how I show up authentically, is that I'm willing to pause and reflect and encourage them to challenge and to be ridiculous and to be a person. And, occasionally I try to do it very sparingly, share about, here was a time I felt like that, and it seems like the times that I have chosen to do that, the feedback is like, really? That's great. So it's not just me.
I'm not alone.
You're not alone. We're people, we're all just people. Of course I struggle. It took me an entire adult life to figure out this career was something that I would enjoy, so those are the ways that I do that.
It seems like by allowing them to be authentic, or starting off with you being authentic as a therapist, it gives them the space to be authentic back. And within authenticity, there is safety.
Yes, there's that connectedness, which is why I named my practice One Psychological Services, because
I was wondering.
Yeah, and I've kind of struggled with how to present that on my website in a way that makes sense, but it's the connectedness. it's the humanness in each of us, the need to be that innate need, whether we're consciously aware of it or not, to be seen and known and heard and validated and loved and accepted at some level for who we are. There's oneness within that. And I don't think we're as separate and divided as humans as we like to think we are. I mean, there are certainly big things that we can see differences, whether it's being part of different ethnicities or communities or geographic locations. But it all goes back to humanism, right? That those basic underlying needs that we have as people are all the same. And so if we can see what connects us as people, then suddenly the other stuff doesn't quite matter as much because we're all just trying to get our needs met in some way. So that's why it's one.
That one psychological services that name speaks to the need as humans to be connected. That's a basic need.
Mm-hmm.
Food, water, shelter, connected. Yeah.
Love.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Being loved, being cared for, being welcomed in, having somebody wrap their arms around you, whether it's literally or metaphorically, embracing you for who you are as a person.
Allowing you to be seen and authentic. Heard. Yeah.
Those are the things I love. Mm-hmm.
I can tell you're smiling, your face is glowing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Curious how, if you're okay and comfortable sharing, just, in your own journey towards where you are now, were there moments where you're like, I was truly seen and heard, and that impacted me in a great way, or those moments where you felt seen and heard and you're able to be authentic, and how it brought you to where you are now?
I have really good people.
Yeah.
I have the best people. So I think, as I'm scanning, there are some really primary people who have seen me and heard me in different ways. And I have, I mean, my husband he knows me better than I know myself sometimes. And there are moments where he just, we take turns centering each other. And so in the moments when I can spiral and he can center, those are moments I feel seen and heard.
What do you mean by centering? What does that look like for you and your husband?
I think, when you're stressed about something, you just kind of spiral. I think that's what I mean by that.
Very familiar.
I don't can't say that they haven't been stressed and they don't sometimes spiral. So, when either one of the two of us are kind of reeling out about something, being able to be the calm that says, okay, these are the options. And here's what I'm noticing, or here's what I'm seeing, or what do you need right now? And sometimes he doesn't even have to say, he just knows that what I need is a hug. And so that's where he'll start.
I tell my husband the same. I tell him that he's actually my calm. Those are my wedding vows, actually.
Oh, that's so nice. That's so lovely. And I will say, I could go on. My closest friend that I've known since 5th grade she's also an Andrea whisperer.
An Andrea whisperer.
She is. Yeah. The two of them know how to whisper me but my kids, each in different ways. This past year, I really struggled with passing my licensing exam. It's hard, FYI, anybody considering becoming a psychologist, the licensing exam is outrageous.
In Arizona, especially.
Well, they've loosened it since then. Yes, since you and I spoke, they changed their requirements. It was a two exam process, and for now, it's just a 1 exam process. But nationally, I think in 2026, they're looking at making it a 2-part. But 4 years of grad school, a dissertation, and internship, and commuting over 100. Let's see, not over 100 because it's 100 miles each way. So maybe closer to 500 to 1,000 miles each week. So much easier than trying to pass this exam. But what I so appreciated was, when I didn't pass it the second time, each of my kids responded to me in a way that was so them and so me that just those moments made me feel seen, appreciated, and encouraged. And friends, just like I said, I have great people. I could go on for days about this. I have family. I'm super close to my family. I have a very large family, and all of them get me at a different level. I'm out there for my family, but they all see me and appreciate me and love me. So I feel like I had a really good blueprint for what being allowed to be authentic looks like.
A good baseline.
Yeah.
And so it sounds like your community, your connectedness to others helped you find that motivation and that resilience to move forward, for your career, and to get through the test licensing and the testing.
Yes.
That goes back to that human basic need of being connected.
Yes.
Community.
Definitely.
Yeah. Community is important.
It is important. This is why I love that you're doing this, so that you can spread and bring hope, messages of hope and resilience to people, that you can build a community where people feel seen and heard, and like you're not in this alone. Even if we're not able to meet face to face, with each of the people that you bring on here, that they can hear the stories that are shared and know that they're not alone. We're in this together.
Yeah. I think that's something that a lot of people are starting to realize, that community is kind of like the root, of a lot of things for us. And, in the US, we're not necessarily, it's not our default, the whole being independent and pull up your bootstraps is the default.
Very individualistic. Collectivist cultures have a much better handle on what community can look like and the value of community. And I was just reading a book the other day. They were talking about parenting, how it looked decades and centuries ago, how we were never meant to do this thing alone, that it really does take so many people. There's the cliche of it takes a village to raise a child. And I felt that way as a student. It takes a village to raise a student, or a person, or a parent, or takes so many people to pour into the success. Like, when you see somebody who's successful, it wasn't just their perseverance or dream or goal or vision or whatever. That had a large part to do with it. I mean, you have to, as an individual, have your own motivation and desires, but also the people who support you. There's study after study after study that shows how important social support is to an individual in terms of growth, thriving, and even healing. Those who have chronic illness, the better their community, the more likely they are to have a positive outlook on their prognosis and a much faster recovery.
Let's focus in on that.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about, that. I think there's research behind that too, right?
There's a bunch of research behind that. And I, didn't think to pull up articles or anything, so I can't quote.
I didn't ask you to. It's okay.
Yeah. But that was actually part of my dissertation, was talking about the different, well, it was pretty vast. I'm not going to go into all of that, but a piece of that was the importance of social support and connection. So whether it's a student trying to complete an education, whether it's somebody who's received a cancer diagnosis, whether it's, a family who has lost a loved one, the more people that rally around to support them, to fill in the gaps, whether it's bringing meals or providing childcare or cleaning the house or sending a funny meme or taking somebody out to the movies or having delivery, the better the outcomes for the individual. And I think that's why, at least with some of my clients, they've been drawn to their faith communities, because some of these faith communities do that really, really well.
Yeah.
They surround and support the people within their congregation, which is also, on the other hand, why it can be so traumatizing when they're hurt by somebody within their faith community. So, there's
or to come out too.
Yes, especially for our, if we're going back to our LGBTQ community, they felt loved and supported by their faith family, their faith-based family. And then when they come out and they're no longer welcome or seen or valued, or they're looked at as, well, this is a phase, or you're too young to make that decision, or they're somehow othered, that can be really, really traumatizing, rather than like, this is, this is who they are and this is their experience. So anyway, community is super important.
Yeah, sounds like that's a really good focus.
Mm-hmm.
That community support. So there's some really, great people out there that are starting these communities online, Non-Wells with the Feel Human Collective, where the focus is on community. Mm-hmm. And I think our generation and the generations below us are really recognizing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the importance of being seen. A few summers ago, when we were really struggling as a nation to wrap our minds around what race meant and what it meant to be a person of color, we were hearing a lot more about being well represented in media and in organizations and in leadership. And I mean, that's part of it, is recognizing that our communities look different. We have different values and different histories, and that's what America was founded on, right? Like the idea that we could all just come here and live peaceably together, and we've found that to be much more challenging than the beautiful ideal that it was. But does it have to be? Does it have to be so hard to be different? I don't think it does have to be as hard as we make it sometimes, but that representation and that ability to be able to see yourself in some way reflected in the people around you is very validating and very healing and an important part of the human experience.
Yeah, and I think it's being seen, being represented, but then also being understood.
Yes.
Having, like, understanding where that person's story comes from, understanding their story. In, a lot of communities, the Black Indigenous community especially, there's a lot of transgenerational trauma, intergenerational trauma, and understanding that trauma and understanding how it can affect somebody and someone's experience, I think helps with that. Being heard.
Yes, definitely. I think, as you're talking about that, I was thinking about the work that I do with some of, I was going to say teens, but it's really everybody, people, there are camps in terms of like the people who appreciate cognitive behavioral therapy and those who do not appreciate cognitive behavioral therapy.
I'm in the middle. I do it, but
yeah, because I'm the type of person who enjoys a good buffet, I'm going to pick and choose what I appreciate about all the things. Like, and
I'm there with you. You're
any given day.
Eclectic,
which is really taboo.
I know,
do not like you
it.
to say that you are eclectic, but
whatever. It's on my website.
On any given, and which I love because we know what that means. It's, you are not pigeonholed into one value system or belief, and you could at any given point, that's what it means to be person-centered. At any given point in time, you go, aha, this from this orientation works to meet your needs. So what I like about CBT is that it gives the opportunity to encourage people to understand how that generational trauma or how somebody's lived experience can impact the lens that they're viewing life through right this minute. So, you have two people live through a car accident, for example, and one walks away fine, roll over, nobody's majorly injured. One person walks away fine and feels okay and can get in a car the next day. And the other person goes, I might not have an injury, but I'm not getting back into that car. So how have their life experiences up until that point in time impacted the way that they view the situation? And how does living through that situation impact them moving forward? So, another piece of CBT is challenging those assumptions and the way that we interpret information. One of the questions I ask a lot is, what are you making up about that? You're in this situation. Somebody did this thing to you or said this thing to you. What story are you spinning in your head about that? And how do you know? And how is that helpful? And how else could we view the situation? And how can we ask questions or engage with the person in a way that gets us to the truth? So we're not just walking around making up stories about people all the time, you know? And just those simple practices can reduce your stress and anxiety so much.
Yeah.
That felt like a bit of a tangent, but here we are.
No, that's okay. Good tangent, and drawing it back to that community, someone that's gone into using the car accident example, someone that was in a car accident and they're struggling to get back into that car. If we draw back to the importance of community and connection, how could that help them move forward and find resilience?
Yes.
And healing.
Definitely.
What would that look like? Does that mean, there's a supporting network on letting them learn how to get back into a car, supporting them and encouraging them?
Right. And how many of us have ever responded well to stop being a baby, suck it up and just do it?
Oh my goodness, none.
We don't like that. We might just suck it up and do it, but is that our preference? And I know a lot of people take issue with, well, we gotta, sometimes we just have to, they take issue with the gentle approach, which I get. It's not for everybody, but I'll often say I have cultivated a gentle, self-compassionate inner voice that sometimes gives me a little bit more grace and space to kind of process things. And then I have the one that's like, Andrea, just knock it off and do it. Okay. You've tried being gentle. You've given yourself time. It's not working for you. So you have a decision to make. Either get in the car or go get some therapy to help you get in the car, because this is not sustainable for you, and sometimes I need a little bit of push, but having an outside person look at me and tell me to suck it up is not going to fly. It's not going to work for me.
Yeah. And it's the language that we use.
Yeah. Language is so important. And we miss that.
Yeah. Saying suck it up. I mean, that's harsh.
Especially for therapists. We don't talk like that.
Nope. It's maybe having a direct approach, but yeah, there's a lot to think about. I think therapy, especially as individual therapists, we're not working with, or at least I work with children, and that brings in parents sometimes, but for individual work, I think we sometimes forget that community approach. So I'm really happy to hear that that's such a huge focus for you on, that community, having connection, being authentic, allowing people to be heard and seen. And, again, that goes back to the essence of being human.
It does.
Tell me a little bit about, your own experience in school, because, going back to, you said something earlier about as a student, you needed a lot of support and that push. And, there was the insight that was found, like, okay, my family and my friends are here to support me. Tell me a little bit more about that journey, as a student, since, you are a baby therapist. It wasn't that long ago, right?
Yeah, I think I finished up my last class 3 years ago, which has gone so fast.
That's a long time ago.
It does feel like a long time ago. I know. So then when you think about like finishing your last class and then going on internship and then getting licensed, the amount of time that goes in between those things, it is not a quick thing. Okay. So I was older, obviously a non-traditional student. I had been working with students in academic advising, helping them plan out their educational careers. And there was something I really just enjoyed about digging in and looking at my options and what sounds appealing and how do the course descriptions resonate. I would encourage them to sit with those a little bit when they would come in confused. And I often got students who were in those big life transitions. Their marriage ended. They just got done with chemo. They had finished their military commitment, things along those lines. And I remember once the person who did the scheduling saying, these are the ones that feel like they need a little bit of extra care. You're really good at giving them extra care.
Extra care.
They just need a gentle approach, which I thought, what a kind thing to say. And so what I found though over time is that I loved those students that needed just a little bit of extra time who were feeling inadequate because their memory wasn't as good or because they were going to be twice as old as the people in their classes, and to be able to normalize that for them and validate their concerns, but also let them know how we help them to be resilient, the resources that we had available. I've always loved connecting people to resources. Like, here's your community. Again, like, this turned into a theme that I didn't even know I was going to bring to the table, but
yeah, it's a reoccurring connecting the community.
So here we go.
Resources.
Here we go. I found my niche, apparently, through the beauty of this podcast. I've been struggling with it all year. I just needed to sit here with you.
I'm
this is
honored.
why you're an incredible therapist.
This is not therapy, FYI.
FYI, it is not. Disclaimer. You're very good at the question asking.
I try.
So yeah, so after a while of that, I came to a place where I had a master's degree in psychology. I needed that to be able to do that job. And it was like, okay, well, I love the therapy part of this, but I'm not qualified to do that ethically. So what do I do? Do I get another master's degree in counseling, or do I go get a doctorate in psychology? And I decided they were both going to take the same amount of time.
People don't realize that it's pretty similar in time.
Yeah, time. So why would I not get a terminal degree then? Which was the decision for me at that point in time. It's not the right decision for everyone. So my younger two, my oldest had already been on his own for a while. My younger two children were still in high school. And my husband was here. Like, everybody was on board and supportive. It meant I would have to leave my full-time job and commute down to the valley to school a couple days a week and maybe stay the nights. And my oldest was living down in the valley at the time. And so I was able to stay with him, a few nights a week, and his now wife. But people rallied together. My husband stepped up, the kids stepped up. Yeah. Family members, my brother and sister-in-law would call and say, hey, we're down at mom and dad's, got a fire going, come on down, just like giving me opportunities for breaks. Or my sister would say, let's go for a hike. Or, another friend would offer to take care of something for me, or, just little pieces. I had friends that I met at school. One, our first year there, she was like, I have an extra room. You're commuting back and forth. Do you want to just stay with me 2 nights a week? This is before my son and his wife moved down. And so even at school, I had people taking care of me and looking out for me. And, we had free therapy available to us during that, part of our tuition covered free access to therapy. So my therapist was huge in my success. And, Dr. Cindy Rollins, who's a psychologist up here that I work very closely with. I mean, even in the beginning, when I was doing the research of whether or not this is a career I would want to do, I reached out to her and was like, so tell me what it looks like to be a psychologist. And she told me, and then when I needed practicum placement and was hoping to do that closer to home, she was like, yes, come work with me. So she's been huge. Our Granite Mountain Psychological Society community, every psychologist and counselor that I have met through that organization has been amazing and supportive in one way or another. So yeah, there's no way I could have done any of what I did without the support of literally every single person in my life. My kids bringing me peanut butter cups, or giving me a place to stay, or taking me out, to go through Dutch and grab a tea. Just, my daughter has become my biggest cheerleader, at times when, when I got in, she was dreaming of going to an Ivy League. I think she was dreaming of going to Juilliard for acting. And so when I got in, she goes, Mom, it's your Juilliard. And I was like, it is. I mean, that was the first thing she said to me.
I love that.
I know.
I love that.
Yeah. So without those little tiny pieces, there's no way I could have done it. Everybody just really banded together and helped me out and kept the house running and brought me chocolate when I needed it. And yeah, it was really beautiful. So it allowed me to change career fields. It felt like that was the midlife crisis, but it allowed me to pivot and go, okay, what am I going to do next in a way that feels good and authentic? And it took a group of people to really help with that.
it makes sense that you're able to be authentic with your clients, especially when they're experiencing a transition or a pivot in their life, because you were there.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. I've been there many, 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 many times.
Mm-hmm.
And without the support of my family and friends and other clinicians and school buddies, there's something about your school buddies that just, yeah, without the support of all these people, there's no way. It would have been 10 times harder.
Yeah. Yeah.
So bringing it back, I guess that's what I try to bring to the therapy space. Like, let me be part of your community. Let me be part of the people who are on your team to help support you in whatever it is.
Mm-hmm. And it's such a different framework than what we were trained with.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was trained very person-centered Rogerian.
Mm-hmm.
However, I still feel that it was still very individualistic. We were the therapists, we're up here, but that's not true.
Oh, right. No, I don't want to be up here. I mean, that's why I don't go by Dr. Annibale.
Yeah.
I could. I have some clients, they'll joke with me, Dr. Annibale, how are you doing today? Like, great, but that's why I don't. I mean, if that makes you comfortable, that's fine. But I'm Andrea. I'm just chilling right here with you.
You're connecting with them. You're being authentic.
Yes.
And that makes them, again, feel safe enough to feel seen and heard.
Yes, that's the hope. That's the hope. Of course, they're bringing in their own filters and lenses and ideas and expectations. And so sometimes we got to work through that. But yes, that's the hope, is I'm just here with you.
That's the hope.
Yeah.
And with that being said, that's the hope. Where do you find your hope?
Oh.
Or what brings you hope?
What brings me hope?
Yeah, what brings you hope, or where do you find your hope?
I think my relationships bring me hope. Stories of healing and resilience bring me hope. I'm a very glass half full person anyway. So I'm drawn toward optimism because it feels good. With the flip side to that is I can be very easily disappointed when things don't go the way that I hoped they did. But I also have this strong trust that like I've always figured something out, up until this point in time. So even if something didn't go the way that I wanted it to, I'm okay, like it's fine. So, again, I guess, yeah, I find hope in lots of different places. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, when you said relationships, it goes back to that community.
It does. Yeah, my relationships give me a lot of hope, a lot of encouragement, lots of love. I realize that I have privilege in that area. Not everyone has a community who has the capacity to be able to support them, because it's not just having the community, it's also the quality of the community. So I'm fortunate to have people in my life that have the capacity to be able to support me in the way that I need to be supported. So whether that's emotional health or emotional intelligence, however you want to refer to it, like I can share with them. I think maybe this is an important thing to note. It's that I'm not just expecting them to do the things. I'm able to clearly advocate and say, this is what I need. And they're able to answer the call. Because it's not just about people coming and rescuing and supporting the way that you think they should, and them knowing. We don't always know how to support the people in our lives. Sometimes we have to ask them, what does support look like to you? How can I be supportive? Sometimes they don't know. On the flip side of that, we have to be willing as people to communicate, this is what support looks like to me in this moment. So going back to my husband just giving me a hug, he didn't know that he doesn't want a hug when he's upset. That was like the last thing. Please do not come within 10 feet of him when he's not feeling well. That's not what he wants.
Yeah.
That's what I want. And he didn't know that until I shared that with him. And fortunately, that was very, very early on in our marriage. And I was like, okay, when I look like this is what needs to happen. And he goes, got it. And he's never forgotten it. Okay, I see that. It's an equation. Andrea looks this way. This is how she needs me to show up. And he does without fail every time.
Yeah.
So It's that communication is important. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned that you're very fortunate with, having that community. Not everyone does, but it sounds like as a therapist, you are providing, again, that space and that community to advocate, to be one of the advocates,
yes,
for your clients, and, helping them, connect them to resources and supports.
Mm-hmm.
And by having that glass half full, you can also, I think that can be contagious.
Mm-hmm. It's the modeling. I think there was something you said earlier that made me think of that, like modeling how to show up in the therapeutic space. I feel like that's one of the roles as a therapist, is to model what it looks like, whatever it is. And I might not know, but I sure can model authenticity. I know what that looks like. I know what it feels like to be genuine and true, and to be able to articulate my values, which may be different from the person that I'm sitting with. But if I can help them articulate their values, then that can become an important component for them.
Yeah.
But yeah, modeling self-advocacy, I do that a lot. What does that look like? What would you need to say? What would it feel like if you did it a little bit differently? How can you set boundaries in a way that has your needs met while still, a lot of people feel challenged by setting boundaries because it's uncomfortable, or they don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. And you can set boundaries without hurting feelings. Definitely. You can speak up for what you need without it being harsh. So we've covered a lot of ground, Christina.
We have. I mean, again, it's all connected. You're able to be honest and help them, set boundaries and provide feedback because they feel safe because you're authentic, and they're able to be authentic, and it's that community, so it's all tied back to connectiveness, and that is what it means to be human.
Yes, that is exactly what it means to be human.
Yeah. Well, Andrea, thank you so much for being here and, sharing your insights and what brings you hope and where you found your resilience through your career, but not just your career, but also just life. And again, circling it back to being human. So thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to Hopeology. If you enjoyed today's show, please leave us a review. To learn more about us or listen to past episodes, you can find us on all your podcast streaming stations. If you are interested in being a guest, or if you have any feedback, please email us at hopeologypodcast@gmail.com. You can also support our show by clicking on the link in our show notes. Please also follow our Instagram page, Hopeology Podcast, and visit our website, www.hopeologypodcast.com.